Hi, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. Um, I would like to welcome to the third part of our Unlocking Supply Chain Resilience in Europe series, webinar series. The series of webinars that South Pole has been hosting. And today we will be talking about decarbonizing and engaging value chains in Europe for the coming 45 minutes. Before we get started, I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping points. First of all, you might have noticed that you're all in default audio setting muted. That is to make sure we don't have any issues with the noise and etc. Having said that, we really encourage you to post questions through your webinar page, because we will be addressing them at the end of the webinar. Pre-submitted questions will be addressed first, and any questions that we are not able to address during the webinar, we will be sending to the specific participants after the series is done. So introducing the faces you're seeing here today, I'm Karine Basso. I'm heading the agriculture value chains and circular economy practice within South Pole, based out of Amsterdam. And I'm joined by my colleague, Chris Schwartz, who is Associate Director in the agriculture value chains team based in Zurich, and Thales Pires. Welcome, Thales. Thank you very much for being here. Thales is the business development lead at the Carbon Venture EMEA team within Bayer. So, what is the series about, right? We have been talking to everyone about the critical steps to ensure that you're supporting decarbonization efforts within your supply chains. First of all, we went through defining business needs and assessing risks. We moved to a series that was focused on measuring value chain emissions, so really the very beginning of it. And today we're talking about engaging and decarbonizing, really one of the final steps to make sure you're really addressing and driving impact. Whenever we're talking about that, there are a few elements that we consider, right? One of them is to decarbonize your value chain. There are things that you can do quite easily somehow. So when we talk about processes efficiencies, that can provide quite some value as well in terms of cost savings and other elements. But there are a lot of different outcomes that you may think about, right? I think now we will be talking a lot about decarbonization and reducing your emissions, but there are other things that companies will be looking for when working through their value chains. One of them, if you're in agriculture, would be carbon removals, right? How can you increase the carbon stock, for example, at land or through above ground biomass through trees to drive removals in your value chain, as well as improving the water quality within your watersheds or the ones surrounding your supply chain or even your factories, as well as thinking about nature and biodiversity outcomes. We just came out of the COP in Colombia, focusing on biodiversity, and we see the importance that this topic is taking in the overall sustainability space, duly, rightly so. And there are other elements, right, when we talk like renewable energy, regenerative agriculture, which Thales will be talking a little bit more today, as well as ensuring a deforestation conversion-free supply chain and looking at in-setting or in-value chain interventions. A great way to ensure that you're engaging with suppliers, you're engaging, for example, in your farmer communities to drive change and drive impact. When we talk about value chain decarbonization, it's really a process, right? And here you will see a classical process cycle where starting on your right-hand side on the top is about measuring your impact, right? Understanding your emissions and being able, by doing so, to identify your hotspots. We see sometimes that a lot of companies get a little bit stuck on that part simply because it's hard, right? It's an exercise that takes a lot of time, and having data quality, it's really complicated. And at times it can be overwhelming to think, okay, but I would like to know better what's happening in my value chain. I would like to really know the primary data related to that. But at the same time, it's about striking a good balance between knowing enough to act properly and not get lost in the details. Then we move into strategizing, and I'll talk about these topics in more detail in the coming slides, that it is about setting your strategy, right? Knowing your emissions now, where do you want to go? What is your target? Where you want to be in a couple of years' time? And how do you get there? And once you think about what you want to do, you need to engage. And when we talk engage, for the purpose of today, we will be talking a lot about engaging within your value chains, but it's also about engaging within your own company, right? Within different departments and ensuring that the right conditions are there to drive a proper implementation. And implementation seems to be the end, but it's not, right? Once you implement certain projects, certain activities to drive decarbonization, after that, you need to make sure that this is running well and that you're getting to the objectives that you've set, and you go back into measuring again so that you understand what's the impact you are really achieving. When we talk about measure, it's really about identifying the beginning, right? The starting point of your journey. So in this chart, you can see a flow that shows where you are here today. So when you measure your emissions, you're gonna wanna understand where you are. Where would you be if you wouldn't do anything, right? The business as usual scenario that is here represented by the curve that goes up. But also where you want to be when you think about setting a target aligned with science. Think about like an SBT target, a net zero target that really sets the kind of North Star for you in terms of where you want to be in a couple of years' time. And you'll have a gap, and that's completely normal. And the main thing comes to how do you address this gap? How do you close that? What kind of activities you need to do so? There are different elements about that, and we will talk in more detail afterwards, but it's basically about setting a proper plan. And to set a proper plan, we think about really understanding your hotspots and moving into the selected actions, understanding how feasible they are, what is the timeline, and what kind of resources you need to put in place for that. But when we are thinking about strategizing this plan and making this plan really a reality, we need to think about first, what are your emission sources? Where should you get started, right? When you do your carbon footprint, you will see that there are some parts, and most likely you have that as in your value chain, that will be the main kind of emission drivers will be there. So which ones should you address? When we talk about companies within that have agriculture as part of their value chains, a lot of it will be contained in that block. And that is a block that it's quite complex, right? It's not an easy one to address. So how do you do that? What are the priority measures that will really help you? And a priority measure can be something that it's maybe easy to do, right? Think about a no regret measure, a low hanging fruit that's also really relevant and gives a boost of like, yay, we're getting there, we're getting to some impact. But there's also priority measures that might be very challenging to achieve the outcome that you want in a couple of years, but that you need to start now. And that's the point of when do you start implementing. Perhaps there's something that you're going to be only seeing the result in like 5 years' time, but you need to start today. Otherwise, you're not going to get to your 2030, 2040 target. There's also about the structure that you have in place. Do you have the right structure in place, right? We're talking about supply chains here and really looking outwards. But in order to be able to work and engage with your suppliers, it's important that you also have the right structure and incentives in place within your own organization, right? And a lot of times there's sustainability teams involved in setting these targets and setting plans, but it's important that everyone is on board on this journey, that your procurement guidance is really aligned with your goals in terms of carbon reductions, nature outcomes, water improvement, and etc., and how you're creating an ecosystem within your own organization to make that happen. And how you bring your value chain along, right? Which is kind of flipping this thought to the outward. It's important that this plan is not your plan. It's a plan that you shared with your suppliers, right? I think something that we see a lot when we're talking to clients is that it doesn't come naturally, right? It's not a top-down approach. It's important that this is something that is a joint approach where everyone sees the value of those activities. And that's when you start your engagement. And engagement seems such an easy word, but it's not, right? It really takes time and it really takes a good plan to make sure that that happens accordingly. And it's a step that is very crucial to make sure that your implementation is successful. We have a team that really works on engaging supply chains, engaging individuals within and teams within organizations. And it really requires different steps in terms of identifying your partners and At times it can be when you look at your supply chain that you have very strategic suppliers, very strategic partners that you need them in order to make this happen because they are associated with a certain, let's say, commodity that is very relevant, or because they represent a big chunk of your procurement volumes and you need them to be on board. And at times you need them to understand where are they, right? Like in terms of their own journey. Benchmarking and understanding their opportunities, their risks, how they see this topic is very relevant, because at times it may be the case that they are much far ahead, and it's a great way to then collaborate and try to strategize together. But at times engagement may also mean that you need to bring them on board, that you need to train them, you need to help them to get to a stage in which it is comfortable for them to also drive this topic, that they know how to do that. And it's important that we understand that supply chains and value chains, they're very connected and they can all go along. So acting to support your suppliers is always on your own benefit. And finally, it's about reaching out and engaging and making sure that this engagement has a plan, has incentives, and all of that to drive an implementation that is a successful implementation. When we go to implement, and here we're looking more from a project by project perspective, right? This is not something that happens only at project level. Sometimes you might be implementing a strategic approach that will be overarching and touching upon different projects. But when you look into a specific project case, the first thing is about assessing where you are today, having an assessment of like, does this project really meet the different requirements and the guidance and is in line with the latest frameworks. When we are now talking about value chains in agriculture, of course, you want to understand, is this aligned with the upcoming guidance from the GHG protocol on land sector and removals? Is this project really addressing topics related to the regulations that the EU DR, so the no deforestation regulation, is this aligned with that? Are you really addressing all the different elements that should be addressed by this project? And designing and incentivizing, right? Once you know and you assess the project and understand the type of measures you want to take, you need to design then the detail of the project, right? In language related to carbon or related to value chain interventions, you might be talking about a project design document, you might be talking about an intervention design document, where you're really trying to understand the baseline, the different, the feasibility of this, the different risks associated, as well as potential co-benefits. We should not lose the opportunity to use engagement and action on value chains to drive positive impact beyond carbon. Nature is such an important outcome. The social and livelihoods of farmers, it's such an important outcome as well. And all of that can really go well together in a well-designed project. And you start to implement, and it seems so easy, right? When you talk like, oh yeah, you do your plan and now you're gonna just implement it. And that's where things can get tricky. And it's important that we keep a close eye to monitor what is going on the ground. What are things that are happening that you did not foresee? You cannot foresee everything, but it's important to not give up. That's why the relationship between the different actors is so important, to ensure that once you hit those roadblocks, those challenging moments, you can together decide how to tackle that. What are the best routes to follow afterwards? And monitoring and reporting. Implementation can be amazing, but if you do not have the right tools to monitor the results of that, you cannot report back to the organization. You cannot tell to your project partners, hey, look what we achieved together. So having a good plan on how you're going to monitor this and reporting this back is also extremely relevant. And within that, I would like to stop talking and open the floor to my colleague Chris Schwartz, who is going to be moderating the Q&A session with Thales. Thales, very warm welcome to this session. We're happy to have you here today to share some of the projects you've been doing within Bayer and how you've been addressing the challenges that we have just described. Chris?
Yes. Thank you very much, and also thank you for presenting me with a great segue that actually was better than the one that I prepared into the interview. So first of all, thank you for participating, Thales, and for standing ready for a couple of interesting questions that we prepared. But I'd like to quickly pick up the final words that Karini handed me over with is the I think especially this is I'm very excited for this presentation, because we are now in a time where we see much of the ideas that we all had in the past and all the strategic concepts moving into reality. And I think the Bayer Crop Science Carbon Program is one of those cases where we move from, hey, we know what, but how do we do this? And there seems to be an answer to that question now. And in addition, it is a program that manages exactly what you just spoke to, Karini. It is a campfire that manages to allow all actors across the value chain that we all need, sectors and actors, to collaborate with. So it is this point of gravity that this program provides. And I would say, Thales, I'm quickly giving you a minute or two to introduce yourself and maybe speak quickly to the program, and then we go into the number of questions that we have prepared. We have around 15 minutes for that. So again, but don't feel rushed. Handing it over quickly to you to introduce yourself, and then I'm ready with the questions for you.
Right. First of all, thanks a lot, Chris and Karini, for the opportunity to be here. Very happy to discuss the topic, as it is very close to my heart. Not only work-wise, I've been working in region ag and carbon for the last 4 years, but I've been working in agriculture for 10 years, and I come from a coffee farming family, so sustainability and farming is in the blood, right? Speaking very quickly, I will not delay too much talking about myself, because I think the audience would like to get to something more tangible. Maybe to talk a little bit more about our program, I think it is important to start by saying what we are not, right? And to scope out a little bit more. Because Bayer is very known for our core business, meaning crop protection, seeds, and biotech. However, our carbon and region ag program is a separated division under our agricultural unit, right? Meaning that when we are deploying our region ag projects and services, we are not actually promoting and recommending our core products, but rather taking a neutral and unbiased view into the farms and try to come up with the best way to transition those farms from conventional to region ag, regardless of what the best interventions are, right? So that's a little bit to separate how we do things. And our team worldwide is a little bit also separated from the core business in a way, right? With that being said, what we actually do, on one hand, what we want to accomplish is, on the grower side, we would really like growers to be more resilient, for farms to be less prompt to climate change effects. And of course, by doing that, by being more resilient, we would like growers to be more profitable by implementing sustainable practices and also tapping into new value pools that today it might be trickier for them to tap into. On the other hand, we have our customers who are companies, and we would like companies to achieve their climate commitments, of course, but through achieving their climate commitments, I think the most important thing, and I think Karini, you mentioned that, we need to have tangible results. We need to prove that this is actually not a narrative. We need to prove that there is actual impact on farms' livelihood when you're saying that you reduce or you sequester carbon, or that you are improving biodiversity on a farm, how that actually improves the grower's livelihood, and how that actually has impacts on the environment, right? And then very quickly on the how, and a little bit of our where we are standing right now, because I think it's important. Currently, we have around 2 million hectares in which we are already measuring and deploying interventions and tracking these interventions. We have around 22 projects worldwide in all regions, so North America, Latin America, Europe, India. So we do have a lot of experience in these grounds, and it's important to be global. And we refer back to one of Karini's comment again. It's very hard for companies to report it. And most companies are also sourcing from so many countries. So if you have a lot of effort spread around and you're just spreading the butter thin, it's so hard for you to come up with something that is actually representative of what you're doing. So we try to overcome those challenges. But most importantly, being global is important because we know how much investments and how much resources you need to put into this, right? And being able to see all the challenges globally and invest into the right things so we can join this value chain not only locally but through several countries, through several views, it's important. And then my last comment here, Chris, maybe I'm already taking too long. There are maybe three main things that I can mention in our programs that are very important for us. First of all, let's go for a grow engagement, because I think this is core, right? We don't believe in hands-off approach, in the sense that we don't believe that you just send an Excel file to a grower, you expect them to give you the data, and you call this region ag. We believe that you need to be there on the farms, not only to facilitate data collection and automate data collection, but also to give growers the right advisory specific to their farm, what in their reality, how they can implement practices and how they can make that economically viable, right? So that's one of the first pillars and value drivers for us. We always have people there. The second thing for us is to be science-based, and when we're talking about MRV, how your models are proven, how your models are actually accurate, and you're working with the best-in-class MRV partners and systems, and you're ensuring quality. And the last one, of course, and this is where our partnership with South Pole is really fruitful for us, is on the carbon expertise and the regulations and standards expertise, because you can do the best work ever. If you don't know how to transform that into an asset, it's all in vain, right? So knowing how to deliver high quality assets, knowing the guidelines, knowing the certification pathways, this is important for us. So this is in a nutshell the first answer here, Chris. And sorry for taking a bit longer.
No, I'm a fan of rich answers. Thank you very much, and I think this is where we also get the value out of the insights that you can offer us. Let me combine the questions that I had prepared, because you already gave me a little bit of an idea and a partial answer. So from an outside standard, from a company being one of those ambitious companies having set ambitious climate targets, we all know that especially the companies with an agriculture and forest-based supply chains, IO footprint, are very much interested in addressing those emissions in their pesky scope 3s. Can you give us a little bit of an insight what the bits and bolts look like, or how does your program look like, and how does it enable companies addressing exactly those scope 3 emissions that we all have still a mountain to climb on to get this done? But how does your program help companies to address those emissions?
Yeah, so again, I will refer back, and I will try not to be repetitive, but I will try to reply actually getting another thing that Karine mentioned, right? So first of all, before starting anything into scale, you need to understand what is the current reality that you're trying to work in, and trying to understand those growers from an economical point of view. So what are their struggles, but also from a more agronomical point of view. So what are they currently adopting? What is the soil type? What are their neighbors doing? What are the real interventions that they can adopt and that will have impact? So before starting with anything on scale, we always try to go through a agronomical and economical assessments of the sub-region and region reality. Then after that, you can actually choose the pathway that you want to go for. Is this an intervention-based approach because you have a lot of potential to reduce it? Are you going for a livelihood impact because you can impact the community around those farms? Or are you going for a biodiversity, soil health, and approach in which you're measuring those metrics beyond carbon? And one thing important here that is key for us, we cannot be talking about only carbon anymore. It doesn't make sense for growers to be talking about carbon. If you tell a grower that they are reducing 20% of their emissions, that's great, but what does that mean for their reality? So you need to go beyond. You need to reach out and have a landscape view of those farms and talk to the grower about the outcomes that they can get, right? So I think this is the basics on how we set up projects. So having a good agronomic economic assessment and trying to come up with a landscape view that is actually promoting something that goes beyond carbon on those farms. That also goes for the incentives that the growers might receive. And then, of course, the three layers that we approach, and I will not repeat myself again, Chris, because I think those are the three main pillars for us. Is again, the grower engagement and ensuring that the growers are having the right experience, that they're having the right supports, collecting data the right way and ensuring that it's not a burden to growers and it's high quality, and that then when you're processing that data, that you're doing it with the best in class models and you're based on science, right? And then the third one again is transforming it and following the right guidelines for the assets that will actually be useful to that company. So I will not repeat these three layers. I'm happy to get into the details if needed, but yeah, in a nutshell, that's how we approach projects.
Thank you very much. And just to echo how, and this is not just important to South Pole, and I assume to a lot of other companies and organizations that move in that realm, is to empower again the stewards of the land, right? So present the farmers who are not only producing our food, but also presenting them with an project intervention or with an idea that is not burdensome, increases their efforts and adds to their already burdensome work. So I very much appreciate that focus. So your entry point at being upstream at the producers and providing the support that they need to really move the needle and transforming our agricultural value chains. And I'm making a long speech because I'm preparing for my next question. Is you quickly spoke, you mentioned it, the topic of data and technology. And next to engaging farmers, providing the support, meaning on the capacities, resources, we do need to manage that we capture the data in an efficient way and that data travels through the supply chain in a credible way. So I maybe framed already the answer that I'm trying to get at, but if we now look at the role of data and technology being really essential in tracking those emissions that we manage to reduce, could you share some of the ways that Bayer is leveraging technology to track the progress that you make and the projects that you achieve and innovate within this carbon program? So the technology that you use and maybe even some innovative technologies that you're exploring. Could you speak to this?
Yeah, of course. So, and before going down to the more tangible points here, I think we need to recognize a few things here. So first of all, agriculture is a fragmented market, meaning that we have millions of growers and millions of acres out there, right? So it is hard to actually scale up, and without technology, it is just impossible. Let's be very clear about that. Secondly, the burden on the grower, as we were talking, is too high. And one thing that we came across, and we still come across too much, is like people don't see the entire season of a grower. A grower has hundreds of decisions to make and I won't go through it all, but when you come to them and you start talking about region ag, it's almost scary for them. And sometimes it's hard to even talk to them about the data that they're not aware that their farm can produce. If you're talking about fertilization, they will understand. But if you're talking about some other aspects of it, it's hard for them to understand. It's almost scary and it's confusing, right? And it is through technology that you can smooth your way through it. And in the end, it's also the way that you generate the reports for companies. So let me go a little bit through that. First of all, to scale up, data collection can be, we are talking about even hundreds of data points, right? So we are investing a lot in data automation. One of the ways that we are doing, and this is not a secret to anyone, is by connecting our MRV to FMSs, to farm management systems. And of course, we have our own FMS, which is Climate Fuel View. But again, you cannot have a very selfish view when you're talking about region ag. So you need to collaborate with more people. So we are trying our best to connect to the FMSs that growers in our projects are already using to reduce this burden. So I think this is one important thing, and also leveraging on the machinery. Then we are also talking a lot about monitoring and acquiring this data automatically, and then satellite imagery is something very key. And we are developing an in-house solution for that. So we do have satellite imagery, and we are just investing a lot of our time, of our resources into get this. If you're monitoring cover crop, what is the type, what is the quality of the monitoring that you have? Because it's just not say yes and no. You need to have more. If you're monitoring no-till, how deep can it be? And this kind of thing needs to come up. And so it is important for you to have a monitoring strategy that is not relying on a human being going to that farm every other day, right? I think the other piece that is very important is when we are talking about removals, and let's not sugarcoat it. Removal is still a pain in agriculture, right? It's still very expensive, and we cannot sugarcoat it. So we need to find ways to reduce, to stratify more how we do the soil sampling. And by doing that, of course, you will need a lot of data, and you need to put it in your models, and you need to join that also with remote sensing. So you can get a soil protocol that is actually allowing you and enabling you to reach a good level of accuracy. You will never be perfect, and that is also a word that we should not be using here. If you want to take action, you cannot be perfect. But this is one of the things that we are investing our time a lot, right? So how do we actually get a soil protocol that can help us reduce the amount of soil samples and the type of soil samples in the end, right? We are also working with our partners not to rely only on traditional soil sampling, but also near and so some other technologies out there. And how do we get this technology to a good level of accuracy? So I'm just giving you a few examples of what we are actively engaging, and our science team is dedicating a lot of time to actually come up with and to integrate that and all of these puzzles so we can scale up faster in 2024 and 2025 and onwards.
Thanks. Yeah, I could not argue with this. There are still some challenges to be addressed. I absolutely believe that we cannot probably scale this without the use of data and technology and really innovative solutions, even though often the interventions are very, let's say, traditional and old, right? So sometimes it is not rocket science, but there are some challenges that prevent us from really scaling this. And I think we now really move into, since we now have the gravity or the campfire, we have a large 150-year-old company that manages to compile a group of experts and innovative companies that really seek impact through agricultural interventions. We move into a world where data and technology we are starting to sort things out. We also see that there's more and more interest in companies really engaging in this topic. So now that we have a situation where many of the challenges are resolved or are being resolved, can you quickly speak to the business case for companies to participating in programs? So what is in for companies engaging in that? What's the advantage of, instead of coming up with their own program, to join in a larger effort in momentum or movement? What is the business case in your perspective for companies investing in low carbon agricultural products or productions in the European agriculture sector?
Yeah, and before going down to the specifics of a single company, I think a holistic view on the problem is important, right? Because when we are talking about this subject, one thing we need to be very clear about is that this is not only a problem in one or two farms or in a region. We are talking about food security. And in some food value chains, that is becoming so clear and almost to a desperating point, right? Because you're losing so much yield, you're not being able to produce on the regions that you were before. You have new plagues coming up. So we are getting to a point that is very critical for food security, for energy production, for textile industry. So this is not a problem of agriculture. This is a problem that extends to all parts of society. So we cannot take such a selfish approach to say that there is one player that can solve the problem. And it's not, and I can guarantee to you that Bayer doesn't have, that we don't look at ourselves in this way, like Bayer is the super company that is going to solve all the problems and we have everything settled to get it done. So collaboration and having these pieces coming together is important. So when we are talking about business case, first of all, let's look through the grower perspective. What do we need to provide growers? And carbon by itself, it's not enough. If you're paying $30, $20, $50 per hectare for a grower, that will not change the business case for a grower. So again, when you're deploying a project, you need to be able to prove that beyond the reductions or whatever you're doing there, you are accomplishing soil health improvements. You are improving their profitability. You're optimizing the inputs that they are using, therefore how much they are spending on a season. So all of that needs to come together. So that is the first part of the business case that we need to come across, right? The second bit for companies is, again, we are talking about their value chains and we are talking about resilience, and this also comes to bear, right? So we are talking about our future. If we don't start investing right now in our value chains, we might end up in a situation in which switching sourcing regions and trying to come up, and we are seeing the pressure on commodities year after year, and it's getting more critical. So you're not only talking about how much savings I can do by sourcing oil seal rape this year. You're talking about how much you will actually have in the next year, how many people you will need to fight in the market to acquire that commodity. So I think this is one thing that is very important, and companies need to embed that into their thinking, right? So you need to embed Region Ag not as a cost-driven approach, but as a sourcing strategy. This is key for me on the business case for companies. Then on the other hand, again, we are not only talking about the CPGs, we are talking about banks that right now are trying to change their risk models to accommodate climate effects. Therefore, if growers are fighting for it and growers are changing the ways that they are producing so they get more resilience, can we also change the risk models so growers can actually prove that they are going down the right road, so they can be a better customers to banks. Therefore, they can maybe achieve lower interest rates. That also goes for insurance, right? We are talking about production loss, and this is very critical. In some regions, this is and you have government programs, but you also have private programs. So can we get insurance on board? And then this also goes for companies on our core business and traditional business. When we are talking about inputs, can we get inputs that are more sustainable? So the business case, what I mean to say is not one business, one company, but it's whether a more holistic view and embedding these metrics into the real business, not sustainability standalone. Is Region Ag embedded on how you do and you connect with growers, right? So I think in a nutshell, that's what I would put, Chris.
I had to take notes on this one. You gave me a couple of ideas. Thank you very much. I think pointing out that this movement is a business case not just for one actor but for multiple actors if done right, and that, let's say, the evaluation of its importance and value is more of a imperative. So companies really need to not consider this an additional opportunity to create revenue, but really this is the future, and this is where we need to go to ensure food security. That's a strong business case. Thanks, Thales. Quite convincing. I'm seeing now we have little time left, even though I would have one or two follow-up questions, but I think we need to do this in one of our follow-up calls. I see we have a couple of minutes left, and I didn't have an eye on the chat. Maybe I'm looking back at Corinne and Abby, who hopefully have a long list of questions gathered from the chat that we can now try to go through. Thales, thank you very much. I think there are many more questions that we could explore. It was just a glimpse of into the program that we work on together, and I very much appreciate your input and insights that you offered today. And
thank you very much.
Concludes our small interview.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good day.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So it seems there are a couple of questions in. Let me quickly, Corinne, should I go quickly through those questions? I couldn't see you. I was on the, yeah. I see you nodding. Okay, perfect.
Sorry. So I think one of the, are you going to go through the questions, Chris?
No, I think you had time to read them already. I would need to still read them. If you could do that quickly. Thank you.
Sure. I think one of them that came up is, how does South Pole suggest measuring the impact of stakeholder engagement on decarbonization goals? So I think one of the main points, and maybe I'll give a shot on that, and I think Thales correctly already addressed some parts of that, right? Like how do you measure and the importance of measuring it. But I think one of the key things that we see there is that it's really important first that you have a proper design, right? About what you want to achieve within this engagement, right? Like you cannot measure something that you don't know what was the purpose of. So it's really a rounded strategy to understand what do you want to achieve with this engagement, right? As Thales was saying, it's about at times now talking only carbon it's not enough, right? It's also about talking about nature outcomes. It's about potential livelihood improvements if you're talking to farmers, as well as understanding the overarching impact that that kind of program can have. So it's about tracking the engagement directly, right? It's about like how much you're talking to suppliers, how many suppliers you're talking to, what is the outcome in terms of the engagement rate that you got, like from the suppliers that you reached out, how many decided to join the program, whatever program it is, it's a Region Ag program. What is the acreage that you're able to cover with that? But it's also important then to find out not only from an input perspective, like thinking about this kind of impact pathway, but also measuring what comes afterwards, right? How much did you invest on it, but how much you're getting out of it? And what is the potential impact? I think that's something that it's really crucial. And we see so many new MRV systems coming up, right, Alice? You mentioned that the importance of that. But it's also very crucial that we spend the right time on implementing and driving impact. I think something that we hear a lot of clients saying as well is that at times there's so much after on the monitoring, the effort put on the monitoring, that how do you make sure that you're also addressing the impact itself and being busy with creating that impact, right? I don't know, Thales, if you have anything to add to that.
I would just agree to your last comments. And I think I was in a panel 2 weeks ago, and and we were discussing so much regulations, and we were discussing like the right way of shaping things. And in the end, for me, the call to action is get tangible and get to the field with the growers and do it, and get and measure it to the best of your ability, to the best of the data that you can collect, but start talking to the growers and measure the impact on the farm and promote it and listen a lot. So that would be my take on, especially on the last bit of your answer.
Yeah. And do you report the impact back to the growers as well? Are they familiar with what they are achieving?
Yeah, this is so important. Again, you cannot be hands off, and it's not just getting data at the beginning or after harvest, and then coming after 6 months when you verified all the data. You need to have more contact with them. Otherwise, they would never understand the meaning of the project that you're deploying. In the sense that, okay, so after harvest, you collected the data from the previous season. How do you prepare them for the upcoming season? Already using some of the results, but also using your expertise in the region that you're working on agronomically, right? So it is super important to have these touch points with the growers. And again, there needs to be a balance, otherwise it's not economically viable. So it's not that you're there every day of their journey, because again, they have thousands of things to do. But if you only pop up with an Excel file once a year, that is also not working, right? So finding out the right balance there is important.
That's such a good point, right? And it's the whole idea of engagement and bringing them together, right? And I think that that's something that, considering we have only 1 minute, that I think is important for us to maybe stick with that last thought, right? That it's important to take the farmers as kind of the main actors here, right? I think in a lot of times people are just like pushing all the different requirements into that part of the value chain. And it is so important that it makes sense for them, that we think about their livelihoods, that they are brought along and they understand why is it that they are doing that, what kind of benefits this brings for them from a resilience perspective, from a future perspective. So very great thought there, Thales. I see we have like just 30 seconds left. I would like to thank you very much, Thales, for sharing your thoughts here, for taking the time and spending this 45 minutes talking to us. Thank you very much, Chris, as well, for moderating the Q&A part of this session. And I would like to also make sure I thank everyone as well that is watching this and collaborating with the questions. As I said, we would love to be able to answer all the questions. Unfortunately, we do not have the time here. We will be sending the answers to the different participants once we are able to address them as much as possible. So thank you all very much, and I wish you all a lovely day ahead.